Okay, picture this. It's 330 BC, and one of the greatest cities in the ancient world, the very heart of the Persian Empire, goes up in flames. I mean, completely destroyed. And the man in charge? None other than Alexander the Great. So, for more than 2,000 years, people have been asking the same thing. Was this some tragic accident? Or was it a cold, calculated act of revenge? You know what? Let's get into it and see if we can solve this thing. The craziest part is that even the ancient writers couldn't agree on what happened. Take the historian Diodorus Siculus. He basically says, look, the burning of Persepolis was payback. Plain and simple. It was revenge from when the Persians torched Athens a century and a half earlier. But, and this is where it gets interesting, he also drops these hints that the real story is way, way stranger than just a simple act of war. So what really went down that night? Was this magnificent capital just gone in a spontaneous drunken free-for-all? Or was it something else entirely? A deliberate political message, a statement carved in fire for the whole world to see? We're going to dig into all the evidence and see what it tells us. Right, so to really wrap our heads around just how big of a deal this destruction was, we first have to understand what was lost. I mean, what was Persepolis? See, to the Persians themselves, it was Parsa. It was their heartland. But the Greeks gave it the name we know today, Persepolis, which literally means the city of the Persians. And you gotta understand, King Darius the Great started building this place way back in 515 BC, but it wasn't a city in the way we think of one, with bustling streets and houses. No, it was something much, much bigger than that. Think of Persepolis as pure political theater. It was a jaw-dropping stage built for one reason: to awe and intimidate anyone who saw it. This was the spot where, every year for the Nowruz festival, the Persian New Year, delegations from all over the massive empire, we're talking from Egypt all the way to India, would show up to present gifts to the king. I mean, just imagine walking through that gigantic gate of all nations, with these mythical human-headed winged bulls staring down at you. And then you enter the Apadana, this audience hall so huge it needed 72 massive columns to hold up the roof. This place wasn't just a city. It was engineered to scream power. So, into this heart of Persian power marches Alexander of Macedon. It's early 330 BC, and after a whole string of frankly unbelievable victories, he's finally standing at the doorstep of the empire's symbolic core. But let's be clear, getting there was no walk in the park. At a mountain pass they call the Persian Gates, a small Persian force led by a guy named Ariobarzanes managed to hold off Alexander's entire army for a whole month. It was a brutal, bloody fight, one of the toughest he ever faced. So by the time Alexander and his army finally broke through, you can bet tensions were running sky high. So when they finally got to Persepolis, Alexander just unleashed his soldiers. He basically told them, go ahead, take whatever you want. It was partly a reward for that brutal fight, but it was also a terrifying message to any other Persians who might be thinking about resisting. The ancient accounts describe this total frenzy, just soldiers ransacking everything, hunting for riches. But that was just the start of it. Okay, so this brings us back to the central mystery. Why burn the palaces? Well, if you look at the ancient writers who wrote about Alexander's campaign, you're going to find two completely different stories. And I mean completely different. Yeah, these two accounts could not be more night and day. Okay, story number one. This is the more famous, dramatic one. The scene is a wild, drunken banquet. An Athenian woman, a courtesan named Thias, supposedly gets up and goads a very drunk Alexander, saying, hey, let's burn this place down for Athens. And he does it. They lead this drunken mob with torches. It's all about passion, impulse, and too much wine. Then you have story number two. This comes from the historian Arrian, who was using accounts from Alexander's own generals. And his version? It's a formal, sober debate. Alexander argues that torching the palace is a calculated political move, a final act of revenge for all of Greece. His top general, Parmenion, actually argues against it, saying, why destroy something that's ours now? So you got passion on one side and cold, hard logic on the other. So, which one is true? And for centuries, that was pretty much the debate. Was it the drunken party or the sober debate? But then, archaeologists started digging. And as they sifted through the actual ashes of Persepolis, the physical evidence, the forensics, began to tell a third story. One that frankly doesn't quite line up with either of the written one. Okay, first up, let's talk about the money. The sources say Alexander seized an absolutely mind-boggling fortune from the treasury at Persepolis. We're talking something like 120,000 talents of silver and gold. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that is thousands of tons of treasure. You don't just stuff that in your pockets and leave. Moving that much gold and silver was a colossal undertaking. It took a massive, organized logistical operation, thousands of pack animals brought in from all over the empire just to haul it away, and that would have taken months. Right away, that doesn't really sound like the kind of thing that happens during a spontaneous wild party, does it? And this brings us to the timeline, which is maybe the most important piece of evidence. The archaeology and the logistics of moving all that treasure show us that Alexander and his army were actually in Persepolis for about 4 or 5 months. They arrive and do the initial looting in January. But the palaces? They don't burn until May, right as the army is getting ready to leave. So the fire happened long, long after any kind of victory party would have. The story of a spontaneous act on a single wild night, it just doesn't fit the timeline at all. And then you have the forensic evidence from the ashes themselves. I mean, this is where it gets really clear. 1, the burn patterns show this wasn't one chaotic fire. It was started in multiple specific places at the same time. This was coordinated. 2, and this is a big one, look at what burned. The fire was concentrated on the buildings built by King Xerxes I. You know, the same king who burned Athens 150 years earlier. Other buildings were left alone. Come on, that's not a coincidence. And finally, it all went down after every last bit of that treasure was packed up and gone. Put it all together? This wasn't an accident. This was a planned, strategically timed, professional arson job. So when you take everything, the timeline, the treasure logistics, the forensic burn patterns, and you pair it with a more sober, logical historical account, a very clear picture starts to emerge. That whole drunken party story, it was probably just that, a story. A really good piece of propaganda, maybe cooked up later to make a cold, hard political decision seem a little more passionate and a little less ruthless. The reality on the ground points to one thing. The burning of Persepolis was a deliberate, meticulously planned political and military statement. The motive? Crystal clear. It was the ultimate act of revenge for all of Greece. This was Alexander settling a 150-year-old score in the most brutal, definitive way possible. And it was a message with 2 distinct audiences. For the Greeks, it was a signal. Vengeance is done. We won. And for the Persians, the message was even clearer. Your empire is finished. There's a new world order now. So in the end, Alexander didn't just conquer an empire. He literally burned its symbolic heart to the ground. But the great irony is, the very fire that destroyed Persepolis is what made it immortal. It's why we're still talking about it thousands of years later. Which leaves you with one last question to chew on. Was the burning of Persepolis the end of a historical chapter? Or was it the very calculated, very deliberate beginning of a legend?